Hello, ACCA students. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are joining us from. And a very warm welcome to this In Focus webinar ahead of your September 2025 exams. My name is Martin, and I work as Education Support Manager here at ACCA. And this session today is titled Examiner's Report Unlocked, and will provide an in-depth exploration of the latest examiner's reports and uncover strategies to help you boost your performance. I'm glad to be joined by expert tutor Afaf Noor, who will deliver this session, and she will help explore common pitfalls as well as share some essential technical points along with a few examples. Now, during this session, Afaf will also guide on how to effectively use available exam practice resources such as the marking guides and sample answers on the practice platform, and how to present your exam responses clearly and confidently. We'll also cover some of the live questions you will have submitted through the Q&A window. But before I hand things over to Afaf, I'd like to briefly run through a quick housekeeping items. Now, at the bottom of your screen, there are a number of buttons that you can use. There's a help icon for quick access to resources and information that can assist you if you have any technical issues during the session. Now, also ensure that both the slides and media player icons are selected, because that's where the content of the webinar will be showing. You can use the chat function to engage with fellow participants, but do note that that's a public forum, so please do not share any personal information there. Now, also look out for the icon that resembles a file. So if you click on that, you will be able to access helpful materials related to today's webinar, including direct links to the resources that we mentioned. Feel free to move things around on your screen. You can resize the windows however you like. And in the event that you can't hear us or you can't see the visuals, just try refreshing your browser. Now, if you've registered for this session, you'll get an email tomorrow with details on how you can access the recording. So don't worry much if you miss out on anything, or if you'd like to watch this again, that will be available for you from tomorrow. I'm going to hand over to Afaf in a moment, and we'll be back with you towards the end of the session. And just a quick reminder, if you'd like to ask a question, we've got a team in the back end responding to those. And Afaf will also pick some of the questions live towards the end. So please ensure you can see the Q&A window. Submit your questions through that window, and we'll try our very best to respond to as many questions as we possibly can within the time that we have. So once again, welcome everyone. And now, Afaf, over to you.
Thank you so much, Martin. Hi, everyone. And like Martin said, thank you so much for joining us today. The main objective for today's session is that an hour from now, you go off, continue with your practice, being a lot more confident than you are at the moment. So we'll start by looking at the general insights from the examiner's report with a focus on areas which students or learners struggled with. We're going to do this question-wise so that we can understand the examiner's expectations for key topics in the March-June hybrid exam. So all my examples will be from the March-June exam, which is available on ACCA's practice platform. I'll talk you through the most effective way of using the practice platform for attempting questions and evaluating your answers against the marking guide. This is something that I've been asked quite often, as in, can we actually write to the extent that the examiner does? So we'll talk about all of that today. We'll have a quick look at the syllabus changes, which aren't that many, and we'll review exam strategies for key syllabus areas, particularly in question number 1, before I answer your questions in the live Q&A. So like Martin said, you can just keep sending your questions in the Q&A box, and I will get to them towards the end of the session today. Now, I'm sure you know this already, but the examiner's report is a very important resource for understanding common mistakes and improving exam technique. And with the exam just a few weeks away, so we have it on the 1st of September, what we're going to talk about now is for sure going to help you identify areas for focused revision. So we still have a good 2 weeks now. You could pick up where your gaps are and start working on those from today, and that would automatically help you be better prepared for your exam. So with that in mind, let's start with question number 1. Now, this is your first exhibit. So like I said, I'm not going to be reading through the question because, of course, that's an entire case study, but I am using examples from the March-June hybrid exam, right? So this is exhibit 1. As I read the information, I'm going to highlight the key parts so that when I start writing up my answer, I would make sure I've understood the requirements very carefully. So as I skim through this information, we're going to use profit before income taxes as the benchmark for materiality. Please do not query it, do not challenge it. Because the partner has specified that it is profit before income taxes that you're going to be using, just use it in your answer to question number 1. Part A is for 10 marks and specifies that we should only use exhibits 2 and 3 to evaluate business risks. For 10 marks, we are looking at 5 well-evaluated risks. We'll talk about how to get these 2 marks per risk in just a little bit. But at the moment, because before I go on to the feedback given by the examiner, we need to know what the requirements were. Part B is for 16 marks and it requires you to evaluate risks of material misstatement. Now, these 16 marks include the 3 super easy materiality marks. So it's really just the remaining 13 that we will be working towards. So having that clarity on the exam technique and where the easy marks are very, very important because that will help you manage your time better in the exam. So we'll be covering all of that today. We'll be working towards understanding the exam technique, but at the moment, all we have to remember is the examiner specifies that for part B as well, we are only going to be using exhibits 2 and 3. Part C asks you to design procedures on inventory using data analytics. Now, this is generally a topic some of us are not very comfortable with, and the examiner did feedback to say it wasn't just data analytics, it was inventory as a topic that learners struggle with as well. And part D then directs you towards exhibit 4 to discuss ethical and professional issues. So as I read exhibit 1, please make use of your highlight tool to identify different parts so that I can plan them accordingly when I start typing up my answer. So once all of this is clear, and it's okay if you can't read this, I've just highlighted the key parts that we're going to be focusing on. Let's move on to what the examiner has fed back on. So they've completely said this and over again, that if you do not read the partner's email carefully first and use the exhibits as directed, you are going to lose valuable time along with your professional skills marks. So don't go on to read the entire case study. Always start with understanding what exhibit 1 says, which is where the requirements are. The examining team did say that for all parts, but risk in particular, there's an exam technique or an answering technique that needs to be followed that automatically incorporates analysis and judgment. So if you're simply copy pasting facts from the scenario and listing them down, you're not going to be getting any marks in the AAA exam. So this is like a big jump from AA to AAA. So in AA, when you were identifying risks, you'd get some marks for identifying facts from the scenario and listing them down. So that is not awarded anything in advanced audit and assurance. The examiner is also quite concerned that students still do not know the difference between business risk and audit risk, which results in a loss of technical as well as professional skills marks. So in your business risk evaluation, if you end up writing the answer to a risk of material misstatement, there's no negative marking, but you will lose out on a professional skill mark for communication. Now, I'm sure you know this already, but just like a quick recap, business risk must be from the company's or the client's perspective. You need to read through the scenario and look for problems that the management might face in the future based on the information given. Audit risk, on the other hand, is from the auditor's point of view. So you're going to read the same scenario, but this time around, you're looking for areas in the financial statements that could be under or overstated. Those areas could be double entries, they could be disclosures, and if it's an audit risk question, then you would be getting marks for detection risk as well. So knowing the difference between the two types of risk is very important, because this one professional skill mark is really the difference between a 49 and a 50. I was slightly surprised to see the last one, but the exam team also mentioned in this report in particular that AAA learners are explaining basic terms which isn't required in the AAA exam. So before you start your evaluation of business risk or risk of material misstatement, for example, you do not need to explain what that is. There are no marks for knowledge-based testing in the AAA exam, unless, of course, it's specifically asked. So that's something to keep in mind in case you've been doing this in your practice sessions. We're going to look at this again in a while, because I feel these 4 marks are super easy. But a recurring concern throughout the previous years is that students are not getting the easy 4 marks that are available for materiality in question number 1. So we have 3 technical marks and then a professional skill mark. And I'll give you a template later on to see how that sort of falls into my answer. Additionally, and I think some of you might not know this, but there are up to 2 extra marks available for prioritizing risks of material misstatement, and this is often ignored by the learners. So it's not business risks that we have to prioritize, it's risk of material misstatement. So I'm just talking about the feedback as of now. Through examples, I'll be telling you how to cover that gap or cover that feedback later on today. So like I said, I'm going to talk about both materiality and risk prioritization in a bit. But knowing that you have gotten these easy 6 marks without too much extra effort can actually give you quite a bit of comfort right at the start of the exam. So I need 50 to pass, and I know the absolute certain 6 that I'm going to get for sure. So that comfort is very important, and that'll give you confidence in managing your time as well. It was data analytics and inventory in this question, but generally as well, if the procedures are not tailored to the requirement, you are going to lose out on both technical and professional skills marks. We'll talk about the best way to designing these procedures. And I saw a question earlier, like 5 minutes ago as well. There's nothing that needs to be learned. There's nothing fancy that needs to be done. It's just an approach that you need to be comfortable with. So we will talk about how we have to make sure that the procedures we design are relevant to the requirement, and then there's nothing extra I have to do for the professional skills marks. As long as my procedures are relevant, they are explained properly using the source and the purpose, I'm automatically getting my professional skills marks in procedures. With ethical threats, please remember this is going to be there in almost every exam. The feedback is or has always been the same. And again, this is linking your concepts to the answering techniques. The examiner has said time and again that it is not enough to say there's a self-review threat, full stop. You'll have to explain why it's a problem, and you'll have to evaluate it based on the guidance from the Code of Ethics. So like I said at the start, which wasn't that long ago, AAA is, you could have all the knowledge in the world, but if you're not able to apply that knowledge within the allocated time using exam techniques, you are going to struggle in getting through the exam. And that really is going to be the purpose for the session today. So that was question number 1. So we know what the background was, and we know what the common concerns were. And we are going to focus quite a bit on question number 1 in a little while. So the second question I loved this time around. It was slightly different. The requirement wasn't difficult in as such. It was just something that you had to read carefully and understand carefully. So part A asked for matters to be considered in deciding whether the firm should continue as the auditor of the group. So without reading the scenario, I know something new must have happened, because of which there's now a concern regarding continuation as a client. So nothing to do with acceptance. The audit is in process. I need to see, based on whatever has happened in the scenario, whether it is okay for me to continue as an auditor. And without reading the question, I know there must be some concern regarding management integrity, etc., because that's what the AAA examiner loves testing. Part B requires you to discuss the matters that should have been considered by the client's audit committee regarding the quality of audit. The examiner did realize that you might misunderstand the requirement, so they emphasized that it's the audit committee's perspective that needs to be discussed in Part B. So as I read the requirement, I know this is not something I would have learned anywhere. So I'll have to make sure I'm very alert to the information that's given in the scenario. The question examines, like I said earlier, the audit firm's point of view, which is the continuation decision, and then the audit committee's perspective regarding the oversight of audit quality. The examining team stressed that Part B in particular wasn't done very well. UK's Financial Reporting Council has given guidance on what audit committees need to do to evaluate the quality of external audit. So this is not about their roles for the company. It's their role in evaluating the quality of external audit. This is an examinable document in AAA, and its application was tested in Part B. So again, I'm sure it's there under the same name. But if this is not something you're comfortable with, you should be going to the study hub and reviewing this, right? So this is called FRC's Guidance on Audit Committee's Role or something around those lines. This is not an auditing standard. It's really a checklist of what good audit quality looks like and actions audit committees should take when they're assessing their auditors. If I'm very honest, even if you haven't read this checklist or guideline, you should still be able to pick up the points, right? So we know audit committees are comprised of entirely non-executive directors. One of the NED should have experience in finance, and one of their major roles is to keep an eye on external audit, which includes their independence as well. So I would go through the entire scenario without having read this guidance, and I'd pick up points where the audit committee has not kept an eye on external auditors. So this is not something that was very technical, but yes, the question had to be read very carefully to understand what was being asked. We're going to break this down again because continuation in particular is a topic that hasn't been very frequently tested. So something for you to sort of take back for questions later on. When you're evaluating whether you should continue with an existing client, you need to focus on what has changed that can increase risk. So at the end of the day, something must have happened because of which risk has gone up, and my entire focus has to be on that. And this is where most of your marks were in the June hybrid exam as well. So read through the question, pick up issues which can change the client's risk profile. So identifying things like there will now be a need to rely on the work of a component auditor. So in this question, they'd acquired a subsidiary and they had to use the work of a component auditor. That increases risk. And there were concerns about management integrity, etc. So you'd pick up all these points and say, because of this, risk has gone up. We'll have to reconsider whether we want to continue with this client. Remember, if risks increase, this automatically affects resourcing. So it's not just about what's happening work-wise, it's the extent of work which would automatically affect the need for more staff, and this could mean more time and more audit fee. So you get professional and technical skill marks for saying it's not just about my ability to manage that new risk, it's going to affect my resourcing decisions. So like I said, in terms of your time, in terms of your fee, in terms of the staff that is available, particularly if they don't have the relevant experience. And I'm not sure if you're okay with this, but this is something you should remember for all acceptance and continuation questions. There's always a mark for coming to a conclusion regarding this decision. So be it a new client or a recurring one, at the end of this entire evaluation, come to a conclusion. It could be something as simple as we can continue if these risks are managed, or we shouldn't continue because the risks are too big. So you automatically get your marks for coming to a conclusion at the end of continuation decisions. So remember that every time you see a continuation question, which is not that many, by the way, because it's normally new acceptance decisions that are tested. So in part B, the focus was meant to be on how the audit committee would keep an eye on the external auditor's work. That's the simplest way of putting it. So you were expected to read the scenario and identify areas of concern, such as, did the audit committee ensure the auditor had full access to everything that they needed? So remember, this is a precondition, but then if you have difficulties regarding getting information, or if the management is restricting access, then you do involve the audit committee. So picking up things like, oh, they were not involved when they weren't given access to certain staff or records. Audit committees have to make sure that the auditors have challenged management in areas of judgment. So when they were working on things like fair value, provisions, accounting estimates, etc., did they challenge the management? So this is something that the audit committee is meant to be doing. So these were scenario-specific issues which were quite easy to pick up only if you'd understood the requirement, which was purely focused on how did the audit committee keep an eye on external auditors' work. So with that clarity, if you go on to read the question and the answer, you should be able to pick up the answers quite easily. So that was the second question in the March-June hybrid exam. Question number 3 was nothing new. It was a typical completion and reporting question where you had to evaluate the audit evidence that has already been obtained to see if it is sufficient and appropriate. So you're going to go through the scenario, identify the work that the audit team has already done, and comment on whether you're happy with it. So if they've only relied on poor quality evidence like management representations and board minutes, you'll obviously evaluate that to say that sufficient appropriate evidence has not been obtained. So based on the gaps identified, you were then asked to discuss additional evidence that would be needed. So pick up where they went wrong and then design further procedures to, of course, fill out those gaps in evidence. And finally, you had to critically evaluate the extract from the auditor's report that was given in the scenario. So there was nothing new there. It's a typical completion and reporting question. And if you're comfortable with that knowledge, you should have been able to get the available marks. Sorry, I think I've accidentally, did I skip it? Yeah, so I think I clicked the slides twice, apologies. Anyway, so the examining team feedback on question number 3 was mainly around the technical concepts. So they said that students who struggled here or in this question in particular were the ones who did not understand that professional skepticism needed to be applied to the given indicators of management bias. So there was lots of information that you had to pick up to say, oh, really, is that what the management really thinks? So for example, in their annual report, the management had called themselves the market leaders. And we had to sort of evaluate that to say, that's their opinion. It's not factual. It's not a fact. There might be other companies much larger than this company who have more of a competitive advantage. So this area really related to your understanding of auditor's responsibility regarding other information in the annual report. So you had to pick up stuff where management was potentially biased, and you had to, of course, evaluate that. In recommending further audit work, the examiner said that students struggled with thinking of reliable evidence. So instead of just focusing on management discussions, which is really the starting point, you should have looked for better quality evidence such as industry reports, third-party marketing data, etc., to verify directors' assertions. So as you apply your technical concepts for questions in completion and reporting, you automatically get your professional skills marks. So there's nothing extra that needs to be done to get these marks in completion questions. Now, another thing that was something that you had to sort of focus on was purely your technical knowledge. Please remember, when you evaluate or when you critically evaluate a report, the most marks are in the opinion, whether it is correctly worded, whether the headings are correct, whether the placement is correct. So again, this is like a jump from AA. in AA, you were expected to know the format, the sequence, and pretty much that's really it. In advanced audit and assurance, you have to know what goes inside each paragraph. So, for example, in this question, if you're saying a qualified opinion is okay because it's material but not pervasive, you'll have to explain why. Why do you think it does not change the face of the financial statements? Then, in the opinion paragraph, you can't simply say we've audited financial statements. You have to name them. So you have to write statement of financial position, etc., etc. And your additional paragraphs like MURGC, EOMP, and OMP are always areas that learners struggle with. I'm not teaching this, but very quickly, when we talk about going concern at a client, there are two basic problems. There's only an uncertainty, which would only require a disclosure. So yes, the company would face some liquidity problems in the next 12 months. But then there's a fact that the company is not a going concern. It is going to shut down, and therefore financial statements have to be made on a breakup basis. Now, MURGC is only added in the audit report if there's an uncertainty which was correctly disclosed. So this is something which is the examining team's favorite topic, because somehow students either confuse EOMP with MURGC or they confuse breakup basis with material uncertainty. So this is something that comes up time and again. So again, these insights are important because at the end of the session today, if this is an area that you struggle with, you know you can always go back and revise those topics from the study hub. So this was like a topic-wise overview of what the examiner fed back on. Again, once you've done the question, read the answer, you'll understand this feedback a lot better. Now, moving on to something that I spoke about at the start, and this is something that I feel very strongly about. I've always had people coming to me and saying, Afaf, we can't write as much as the examiner does, right? So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to use examples from the March-June hybrid exam, and I'm going to tell you how to best use the practice platform so that you can self-mark your own answers and you can identify areas where you can focus your revision on. So once I've logged onto my practice platform, I would have used the Browse Available Exams button to assign AAA exams to myself, right? So I'm definitely doing the mock exam for September. I'm definitely doing at least like 4 or 5 exams from the latest attempts so I can practice my answering techniques. So I've assigned that, and I'm now moving on to the next page. And this is where my key work starts. So say on a certain day, I was very ambitious and I've assigned the December 24 and the June 25 exam for practice for myself. And I've completed June 25 and it's ready for marking. So you can see one of them says resume and the other says you can mark this exam. So this is what your screen would look like. I'm now going to talk you through the best way to use the marking guide as a starting point for evaluating my answers. So it's not about how much you write, it's about the answering technique, it's about making sure your answer is conceptually correct. So this is my answer. So if you look at the screen right now, I've clicked on mark exam and this has come up and I've typed in a bit of my answer for reference. So I knew where the easy marks were. I started off with the briefing notes format. In case you don't know this, you get 1 mark for writing to, from, subject, and introduction, and I'm going to fill that out. So to the engagement partner, from the manager, audit planning of whatever the client's name is, and the introduction will summarize the requirements. So the minute I write this, I get another mark. So again, I started off my answer to business risk, and I've said that there is a shipping delay that can result in lower revenue and affect the company's reputation negatively. So this is all I could think of when I was writing my answer to shipping delay. I haven't read the scenario yet, as in case you haven't, you can still see what the problem is. So I couldn't think of anything else. I'm now ready to match my answer to the sample answer to see how I've done. So I've clicked the sample answer. I'm going to go right towards the end, and this is where my marking guide is. So an important point that you need to take away from today is do not start reading the detailed answers straight away. First, open up the marking guide. So when I see the marking scheme, that's my starting point for evaluating my answer. So I've looked at the list of business risks that are there in the marking scheme, and I can see shipping delays is there. I'm only looking for business risk for now, but you can see that the marking scheme covers the rest of the parts as well. So this is more like a checklist for you to see which risks you've missed out on. So with business risks, all they've really said is just the marking scheme, and that's really it. And this is where my technique is coming in. So I'm just going to sort of spend a bit more time on this. I have my answer. I've matched it to the marking scheme. I'm now going to open the detailed answer to see if my evaluation is enough to be awarded 2 marks and potentially a professional skills mark. So the best part about business risk is if you carry out good evaluation, in addition to the 2 technical marks, for some of the risks, you'd be getting an extra mark as well. And as I read the standard answer, I can see where my gap is. Remember, in discussing business risks, you need to explain the implication, so like the initial impact that any company would face, and then you have to evaluate why this risk is particularly important for this client. So that evaluation has to be done. You could actually link it to other information in the scenario. You could link it to other risks from the scenario. So I can now see, because I knew the font would be really small, so I've written it out as well, that I could have evaluated the risk better by discussing that the delay could mean that the clothing is going to be out of season. This is going to result in lower margins, lesser revenue, and lesser cash. Additionally, when I was reading through the handout, the exhibit later on, it was written that the product had been marketed heavily. So I can link that to say that the company's reputation is going to be affected, resulting in a loss of customers. So I'd spent all this money on marketing, and when the customers went to buy that product, it wasn't there because of the shipping delay. So I haven't added any fancy words at all. All I've done is I started with my first mark. So I got 1 mark, by the way, for what I'd written, but I evaluated it by using other information from the scenario. So that's the answering technique for evaluating risk. So for each business risk that I've typed up, I'm going to scroll to the sample answer and match it to my answer to see what else could have been written in that evaluation. So moving on to the next one, this is again the 3 marks that I spoke about. I'm talking about this now. I'll talk about this again towards the end. I can now match my materiality marks to the sample answer. I've used the benchmark that was profit before income taxes. I've written the range. I've kept it simple, nothing fancy, no long sentences. So I've written the range, I've done my calculations, and I've justified choosing the lower threshold using information from the scenario. So please do not ever pick up the higher threshold. Always choose the lower one or a mid-range, and always justify it by using information from the scenario. I would have read the exhibits. I can say, oh, because of X and Y risks, I think materiality should be set at a lower range because risk is higher. And so when I was matching my answer, my calculations match, my range matches, my justification makes sense. It doesn't have to match. And therefore, I've automatically been given the 3 marks. So again, I have my sample answer on one side and my own answer on the other side. I've moved away from the platform for a bit because the content wasn't fitting on the screen. But this is a risk I wanted to talk about because this has been given as an example repeatedly by the examiners, not just in this report, but in the previous reports as well. So the examining team has continuously fed back to say that business risks related to weak corporate governance are often ignored by the students. So the scenario says that they have all executive director roles performed by the family member. They do not have a separate audit committee. There's one NED who's a friend of the family and does not have relevant experience. And they're planning on listing on the stock exchange. My answer is in green. I wasn't able to explain the BR very well. So all I've written is future listing could be affected because of weak corporate governance. I match it to the marking scheme. I can see corporate governance is there. It is a valid risk, but it's about how I explain it. So as I read the examiner's answer, I can see that I could have evaluated my risk better by discussing how the board's lack of skills could affect decision making, or how the absence of an audit committee could mean poor oversight of controls and operations. So again, all I've done is learned from my past exams to explain business risks related to corporate governance. Another example, and this is just for your reference really, I don't want to go into too much detail, but the exam technique is what I want to talk about. So very quickly, the question said that the client has a high level of returns and they get a full refund, and they've given some background information. In my answer, which is the second column, I started by using words from the scenario that the company offers a full refund, which is perfect because I need to tell the marker what I'm talking about. I've explained that the accounting treatment is that a refund liability should be recognized. The risk is that the liability has not been recognized, because of which the financial statement impact is profits are overstated, liabilities are understated. So I know for a fact that my answer is technically correct, but when I read the marking scheme, and if you go right at the bottom, you can see that you can get up to 5 marks for this risk evaluation. And I know for a fact that my answer is nowhere close to that 5 mark. So I haven't discussed the impact on inventory and cost of sales, and I can then read the answer very carefully to understand where my gaps are. Again, for this question and all other questions that you do, please remember your focus on management bias, you're focused on judgment. Any indication that is complex, etc., is going to get you your extra marks. So this time around, when I do this question on any other area, I can see the gap in my answer in the second column. I've been very factual, and I'm getting the marks, by the way. So I'm getting like half a mark for the accounting treatment, for the under overstatement, etc. But I'm nowhere close to the 5 marks that I could have obtained. So I should have focused on bias, areas of judgment. All of that needs to be looked at. This is what I call question-based learning. And as a tutor who's been teaching this paper for over 15 years, I genuinely feel this is the most effective way to actually prepare for AAA. So if you haven't done so already, remember you have most of your latest past exams on the practice platform. Learn through questions, apply the techniques that you already know, and see how you're doing when you actually attempt your mock exam. Moving on to the syllabus changes, if you're taking this exam for the first time, this is not really relevant to you because you'd be using the updated content anyway, so you shouldn't worry about this. But if you're a recent learner, there hasn't been a very significant change in the syllabus, other than minor changes in wording of the learning outcomes that don't affect you. Publicity material is no longer examinable, and in sustainability assurance, there's been a new learning outcome. So you need to know how to evaluate evidence gathered as a part of the assurance engagement, and you have to see whether this is sufficient or appropriate. This is quite similar to what you would do in an external audit evidence question. The technique is the same. It's the information given that's going to be different. So they would have given you maybe stuff about sustainability impact, their environmental, social issues. They would have been reporting all of that in that report. The assurance team would have obtained certain evidence, and you'll be expected to critically evaluate that. Remember, at the end of the day, the concept remains the same. You need to obtain better quality evidence. Important, if you have read through the 3 technical articles on sustainability on ACCA's website, this is not a topic that you're likely to struggle with. I'm now going to outline a few key exam strategies that I feel will result in an easy pass in the AAA exam. Being able to complete the exam is the most important skill in the AAA exam, and that can only come with practice. I always tell my students to allocate time to each part, not just a question, but each part, using the 1.5 minutes per mark rule. So, and this is just the writing time, by the way. So if part A is 10 marks, I'm going to allocate 15 minutes. This is my business risk. I'm going to identify and explain as many business risks as I can in those 15 minutes, and then I'll move on to part B. You can practice this in your mock exam or in the additional practice questions that are there, and we just discussed those. I'm often asked how much practice is enough for this exam, and I never have one right answer. You should be attempting at least one complete mock exam under exam conditions. So for sure, do that. 3 hours, 15 minutes, complete that mock exam. In addition, if you can, starting today, if you can actually practice a full exam every day, that would be ideal. That might not be possible because I'm sure you have other commitments, so maybe 2 questions a day. But when I say practice, it's exactly what I showed you just a while ago. Don't just read the question and read the answer. Read the question, draft your answer, bring up the marking guide, see if it matches, then bring up the detailed sample answer and see where the gaps are. Because this is the best way that you can evaluate your own performance. If you remember at the start, I did say I'm going to talk about the easy marks in question number 1. And I've spoken about most of these already. I'm just putting this all together so that you remember. So the minute the invigilator says you can start your exam, you're going to get your first mark. So 2 from subject, introduction, and I have my first mark. Then I know already for business risks, I need to identify the problem, explain its implication, and then evaluate it, because Afaf said I have to link it to other information in the scenario. So I'm going to look for that further evaluation. You could support it by using the financial information as well. I know my materiality marks are right there. The range needs to be written. Don't just jump to the calculations. So for revenue, it's either 0.5 to 1% or 1 to 2%. Total assets, 1 to 2%, and profit before income taxes, 5 to 10%. Use that range. Please make sure you pick up the current year's figure. Do not pick up last year's comparatives. So make sure you pick up the 2025 or 20x5 figure. And then justify the lower or the mid range. Don't simply say, I'm choosing the lower range because there's so many risks, because that's a 0. You have to pick up words from the scenario to justify that. And finally, your answering technique for ROM is comment on whether that risk is material. That's my 4th materiality mark. Explain the relevant accounting treatment that should have been followed. Identify the risks based on estimation, uncertainty, etc., and explain the impact. So financial statement impact could be a double entry, which is under overstated, or it could be a disclosure, which is missing. So a contingent liability disclosure, related party transactions, etc. At the end of it, and I haven't spoken about this, so I'm just going to spend a minute on this one. At the end of your risk question, risk of material misstatement question, you're going to skim through your answer. You're going to pick up 2 risks which had the biggest amounts, so which were the most material, plus they had some level of either management bias or judgment or complexity. And I'm going to prioritize those in a conclusion. So I'll simply say the most significant risks are impairment of XYZ because it is material, plus it is subject to management bias. The second one is inventory because it is material and the work in progress requires complex calculations in determining percentage completion. So the same evaluation that I've used in my my evaluation, ROM evaluation earlier on, I'm sort of summarizing that and do it for 2 of them. If you spend time trying to rank them, like change the placement or trying to do it at the end of every risk, you're going to waste time and potentially not get the 2 available marks. So it's easier to do it the way examiner does it. She writes a conclusion at the end and prioritizes any 1 or 2 risks. two risks, you have to do it. For audit procedures, remember, we've spoken about this, and there's an entire video I've done, which is available on ACCA's website as well. You have to make sure that you write the source and purpose. So what are you doing and why are you doing it? You actually just have to do two things. You have to audit the information given in the scenario, and you have to audit the accounting treatment. So if the information says a claim was received from the pressure group, confirm that. If the scenario says, oh, they're not recording a provision, think of IAS 37, confirm probability, confirm the amount. And as you do this confirmation, I've given you a checklist or a toolkit, as we often call it, to confirm each of these areas. Is there any document that you can inspect? Any third-party evidence that I can get? So maybe circularize the receivable or send a confirmation letter to a lawyer. Is there any number that can be recalculated? If it were just one claim, there's no recalculation. But if there are many claims, I could get marks for saying I'm going to recalculate them. For areas which require estimation, definitely make sure that you start off by discussing the basis with the management, but you have to get further evidence. You need to get better quality evidence independently. You could use an expert. You can get, evidence from third parties, subsequent year ends, etc., etc. So I've left this checklist in my slides. And like I said, there's another video separately on procedures as well. But this, all you're doing is you're putting your accounting treatment in front of you and you're verifying that using this checklist. And this is how audit procedures really have to be designed and making sure they're relevant to the scenario. Just before we move on to the Q&A, and I think I did excellent in terms of time, I've put it all together. So because I wasn't satisfied that I've said it enough, I've actually put it, the question number one, a template at a glance. So, excuse me, as you start typing up your answers to question number one in the actual exam, in the mock exam, or your practice questions, just remember, this is the sort of sequence that you have to follow to get the easy marks. And with this, I can now officially, after I've had a sip of water, move on to the Q&A. Okay, so we have about 10, 15 minutes for this. I'm going to try and answer as many questions as I potentially can. I'm going to start right from the bottom. Okay, so what's the best way you can learn procedures? Like I said now, don't learn them at all. Your accounting knowledge has to be very strong, your financial reporting knowledge. So keep that knowledge in front of you and just apply my checklist. So for example, if it is impairment, it's carrying value, recoverable amount, which includes fair value and value in use. Confirm or audit each of these elements using the checklist I've given you. You could learn all the procedures in the world. The exam is going to be completely different to what you've learned. It's going to be scenario specific. You'll have to audit what is given in the scenario. Your paragraphs, your answers should be short and to the point. So literally writing stuff like, this raises concern about management integrity is 1 mark. So we should not accept this client because the risk is too great is another mark. So your sentences should be short, complete, to the point. You don't have to write long paragraphs in this exam at all. What's the best way to learn accounting standards and reporting standards? You don't have to learn them at all. Your reporting knowledge is assumed knowledge for this exam. If there's been a gap, as you practice your questions, just revise the standards that you struggled with. So you were okay with impairment, property, plant and equipment, and provisions, but you weren't okay with operating segments. Then just go to the study hub and revise IFRS 8. So I don't want you to learn or revise any of the accounting standards. If I'm very honest, the examiner says SPR is assumed knowledge, but the accounting level has not been very high. So the examiner keeps it quite, simple and somehow FR level. So it's not going to be anything fancy. So addressing question number 1, I think I've given you like quite a bit of information regarding that. So hopefully you'll have more comfort around that. Oh, so if I had to start practice questions from today, what would you recommend doing? Like I said earlier, if you could do a full exam every day, if not 2 questions every day. So use the practice platform, use the marking guide, use the sample answer to evaluate your practice. I've had students who've taken the exam, failed at 47, 48, 49, and come back to me and said, Afaf, we did everything that you said. I was like, okay, so did you do any written practice? No. We read the question and we read the answer. I was like, that's why you got 47, 48, 49. So when I say practice, written practice, huh? Yes. So for evidence and procedures, it is the same. The AAA examiner is not fussed at all. The procedure is the verb, inspect, and evidence is what you get at the end of that procedure. So it's absolutely fine as long as the source and the purpose are covered, you can word it however you want. So the source is the non-current asset register. The purpose is confirming the carrying value. So as long as you're completing that, you can word it however you wish. Could you please advise on a quick structure to follow for critically evaluating it? Yep. So I think I touched upon this very briefly, but always start off with opinion. That's where most of the marks are. So read the question, identify the opinion that has been given. Sometimes the heading would be wrong, the wording would tell you what the opinion is. So if they've given a disclaimer of opinion, then most of the marks would be in evaluating, is this an inability and is this pervasive? So justify that, talk about the headings, the placement. In the next step, look at any additional paragraphs. If they've added MURGC, are you sure it's been used correctly? If yes, is it placed correctly? Are the contents correct? So something, not for this exam, but in other exams, remember when you add a material uncertainty paragraph in your audit report, you have to specify the disclosure number. So it's not just about it being correct and placed correctly, it's about the contents as well. So if you do it in this sequence, opinion, additional paragraphs first, you'll get most of your marks right at the start. So yes, it is across all topics in the AAA exam. It is 1 mark per point other than things like business risk. So business risk is normally 2 marks per risk, but for most of them, a well-explained point will get you 1 mark. Oh, good question. I'm sure you have concerns regarding IFRS 18. So there was an examiners conference a couple of months ago. So I asked this as a tutor as well. And the examining team did say that IFRS 18 is unlikely to affect AAA as such. So, you know, when I was saying profit before income taxes, that's the new word for profit before tax. So it's more like you'll see different terms. You don't use the word finance cost anymore. It's now interest expense. Instead of tax, it's income tax expense, or stuff like that. Worst case scenario, there are additional disclosures that might need to be, that management might be giving. Just have a quick sort of view of those. But it would primarily be understanding the 3 mandatory subtotals that have to be now there in P&L and be comfortable with the new words that are being used. Other than that, there's not much that you need to know. Oh, so for sustainability issues, the syllabus is quite clear. It is primarily focused on sustainability assurance. And there's a very good question that they've published in September, December 24. So that's on acceptance decision, evaluation, and applying professional skepticism. So if you attempt that question, you'll actually get an idea of how this could be tested. So anything from matters to consider before I accept, to planning considerations, to evidence. I would want you to be prepared for these elements, but we have the best resource, ACCA Study Hub. Just go through that content, attempt the September, December 24 question, and you're good to go. I think the new IFRS I've already mentioned, so don't worry too much about IFRS 18. It's just how the information will be presented that's going to differ. Other than that, there's not much that you need to be worried about. Okay, so for time management, if you could very strictly stick to what I said, which is 1.5 minutes per mark. So for a 6-mark question, I'm only going to spend 9 minutes. For a 10-mark question, I'm only going to spend 15 minutes. For a 20-mark question, only 30 minutes. If you can be more disciplined in your time allocation, you should be able to complete your exam. So do it for each part, not for each question. Again, there was another question on time management, and is it advisable to attempt section A or section B first? I always say do the exam in the sequence it is given. So start with section A, but if you want to start with section B, it's fine, but stick to your allocated time. I would recommend starting with question A, if I'm very honest. So 2 marks per point is only for business risk most of the time. There are exceptions, but we won't know that in the exam. Already covered standards, with SPR standards. I won't worry about IFRS 19, by the way. It's highly unlikely that it'll be tested. Just be slightly more comfortable with IFRS 18. Oh, so if audit risk is a 10-mark question, should we write 3-4 full-fledged risk assessment or 5-6 brief ones? If I were to answer your question, it's 3-4 full-fledged, because for me, full-fledged means evaluation of bias, judgment, estimation, uncertainty. And therefore, that's where most of your marks are. But even for that, I would want you to time manage it, huh? So give it the allocated time and write as much as you can within that time. Okay, so for question number 1, I would, again, it might work for you, might not. I always tell my students to first quickly read the case study in about 5-6 minutes, not more than that. Just understand the story to see what has happened, and then spend another 20 minutes using your highlighting tool and identifying risks before you start typing up the answer. So quick read, then a slow read, identifying risks, and then when you start typing up the answer, use 1.5 minutes per mark. Use that for one of the latest exams or the mock exam and see if that works. So right level of materiality, I've discussed this. I hope you're more comfortable with this. In question number 1, use the benchmark, do the calculation for the range, but choose the lower one. In section B, you'll have to do a percentage calculation. So total assets are given, the amount is given, simply calculated. This is 7% of total assets, therefore it is material. It is 2% of profit before income taxes, therefore it is not material. So section B is your normal materiality like you would do in AA. It's section A where the techniques are. Martin, I'm just going to take 1 more minute and then I'll hand it over to you. So I've spoken about prioritizing risks. Pick up the 2 significant ones, justify them. You do not need to write any standard numbers at all. Be it accounting or audit, there are no marks for writing the numbers of the standards. So for mark allocation, again, it's best to watch the topic explainer videos, because in those videos, the tutors have explained the mark allocation quite clearly. So if you could just do that, you'll have more clarity around that. So no, for question number 2, it is all about your basic technical knowledge, no technique as such. So I'll just do the last one and I'll stop here. Martin, just give me, sorry, 1 minute. I always do this. This is a very important one. It wasn't covered in my presentation. What is the difference between explaining and evaluating an ethical threat? An explanation is there's a self-review threat. When the auditor checks their own work, they won't identify their errors. That's explanation. Evaluation starts off by talking about the code. The code says in financial statement preparation, this is only allowed for private companies as well, only if it is routine and mechanical. My evaluation is this, in this scenario, this is not routine and mechanical, and therefore this cannot be done. So explanation is the thread and how it applies, and the evaluation is use the code, apply it to the scenario, and then of course come to a conclusion. I know there are quite a few of the answers, the questions I could not have answered. I'm so sorry, Martin. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Afaf. Clearly lots of engagement from the attendees there. Thank you so much, everyone. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we had for the session today. We've tried to respond to as many questions as we possibly could within the time. But just before we let you go, one of the consistent messaging that has come from the examiner's reports is the importance of question practice and the importance of students applying their knowledge to the scenario that has been provided. So one of the ways that we provide you with an opportunity to practice is a mock exams, which Afaf has rightly highlighted. There's a poll on your screen now. We just want to check how well you are versed with the dates. So do you know when the mock is going to be released and when the debrief videos are going to go live? So the poll is live. You can just click directly into one of the options. Thank you so much for those submissions. I'll give a second or two. Let's see how much informed you are. Okay, thank you. We'll go to the results of the poll, sorry, not of the mock. And 63% are saying 8th of August and 15th of August. 19% have no idea. You're in the right forum because I will let you know. So yeah, looks like we've got the right information. So that's correct. The mocks went live on the 8th of August and the debrief videos have gone live today, the 15th of August. So you have everything that you need for your preparation. Please attempt your mock in exam conditions. Self-mark your mock and then watch the debrief videos to gain more insights and more understanding to the approach. Now, finally, just to remind you of the three main platforms that you should be engaging with right now. The CBA practice platform houses all those past and practice exams and the mock as well. The ACCA Study Resources YouTube channel, we've got a host of topic explainers for any concepts that you're struggling with, as well as recordings for previous webinars, etc. And of course, the ACCA Study Hub, your digital textbook, which at this point in time, you should really just be going back to for any areas of difficulty, but that should help you plug any knowledge gaps. So thank you so much, everyone, once again for your engagement. Thank you for your attendance, and we do wish you the very best of luck as you prepare for your upcoming exams. Thank you, and goodbye for now.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.